So today on the podcast, we're going to speak about Ramana Maharshi, something pretty close to you and I, considering we've spent a lot of time in Tiruvannamalai at the foot of the holy mountain of Arunachala. And we'll go into a lot of his teachings today, also speak a little bit briefly about who he is or who he was, and also who he was before he became Ramana Maharshi. And so, for those of you who don't know, Ramana, at birth, his name was Venkataraman Iyer, and he was born in a little small village called Tiruchuli, not far from Madurai. And so, for those of you who don't know where Madurai is, it's one of the, as you know, it's one of the most holiest places, especially in South India, and it's got some amazing Shiva temples there. And so he was born in Tiruchuli, which is like a really tiny, small village, not a fair way, but a fair way outside of Madurai. And so his father died when he was pretty young. I think he was about 12 when his father died. And he's had an experience when he was 16, right? So he was in his uncle's home, and upstairs in his uncle's home in Madurai, and he had an experience where he had an intense feeling that he was going to die. And so instead of fighting that, as we all usually would, he lent into that experience, like, what am I? Like, I'm going to feel this out. Like, what is this feeling of death that I'm having? Like, is it just a body? What is here? What is present in this death experience that doesn't feel like it's associated to the death experience? And then that is believed to be the moment when Ramana became enlightened. So he was a boy in high school at 16 and became enlightened, and then it was hard for him to maintain his appearances at school and with his family, because he had this sense of an abidance in the self, the Atman, the undifferentiated consciousness, which is identical with Brahman, the ultimate reality of the universe. And so it was very hard for him to maintain that. And he had heard stories about Arunachala all when he was young, and he head off for Arunachala. He left a note for his brother, didn't tell his mum or his uncle, and just took off to never return, right? And Ramana actually said in his older days that it was the power of Arunachala that drew him to Arunachala. And for those of you who don't know, what Arunachala is, a holy mountain in the south, and in mythology it's believed that Brahma, the creator god, and Vishnu, the god of preservation, were quarreling, were at war, and then Shiva turned up and as a big pillar of light, and they both went to see the end of each pillar, like, what's the power of this pillar? And Vishnu never got to the end of that, but Brahma lied and said, I got to the end of it. And, that's why some people believe that's why Brahma is not actually worshipped a lot in India. But that pillar of light was Shiva, because Shiva came out and said, I am the god of gods, I am Brahman, so forth and so on. And it's believed that Arunachala is that mountain, that natural linga, so to speak. And so you and I have lived there. We know that there is a power about the place. I don't know if it's just because the place is centered on sadhana and centered on Ramana's teachings and Advaita Vedanta, but there's definitely a power about Arunachala. And so he was drawn there, and basically spent the rest of his, I think, 54 years. So he was born in 1879, left to Arunachala, or had that experience when he was 16, and both left Arunachala when he, I think, 1896. So, and then he died in 1950. So, yes, 54 years, right? So, and he has become probably the most popular sage of the 20th century, I believe. There's plenty, right? So if we look at especially evolution of Vedanta into Western civilization, two of the most recent figures would be Swami Vivekananda and him. I mean, a lot of Indians would probably argue Swami Vivekananda is more influential because of the spread of Vedanta around the world, with the Ramakrishna mission. But for Ramana had kind of embodied what it's like to be an actual, like, avadut or a jivan mukta, someone who is liberated in this life and dissociated from worldliness, which would be very odd in this day and age with all of the problems in the world today, because Ramana was just beyond all of that, And you and I have spent a lot of time there and kind of had followed that path a lot in our life, right? So
yeah, it was such a significant experience for us. Yeah, first time around we stayed there for like 6 weeks or something, 2 months or something like that. And we returned for 4 or 5 months. We spent really solid time there. Again, like you and I, we always talk about those days when we were in Tiruvannamalai, that we spent such a peaceful days over there. And we were really able to be fully present with the place and local people who have a great devotion to the mountain and such humility and great dedication to their practice and whatnot. That was quite huge impact on us.
our lives, yeah.
Yeah, and even going forward, we're definitely going to return, hopefully sooner than later, obviously. Yeah, I think that's what everybody also wants as well. Just can't wait to get back there. And it's such an important place for anyone who want to be back on earth and just being great people, good food, good energy around the area, and even at the Deepam, like how many Indian people come around the area and just pay their, the devotion to the mountain is such a significant and very important place.
Yeah. And to explain Deepam for everyone, like there's every month on a full moon, people circumambulate the Arunachala, which is about 14 kilometers, right? I think it's roughly about 14 kilometers, and you walk it, so it's a tough one. And they do it. Indians being so dedicated, especially to Shiva, they walk barefoot, and if you're walking barefoot in May or April,
it's very hot.
You're very hot, and your foot's going to probably blend into the road. And there's a significant one called Katagai Deepam, which is usually lands around late November, early December, and that's when millions come into it. Tiruvannamalai actually only has 150,000 people, residents, and so when you have an influx of 2 million or whatever people, then, as you and I know, when we were there, it gets pretty nutty. But it's such an amazing experience. The energy is great, and people are really dedicated. And like you said, the people there, especially the people who live there, it really does ground, especially Westerners and first world people who have a lot of first world problems. When you go to India, actually in general, and you see real life problems, which we don't want to get into with the first world with their behavior. But when you go to the third world, you see real life problems, and it's amazing when you see those people, especially in Tiruvannamalai, where the rural people there are so humble and grounded and connected to Ramana, connected to the mountain, and just connected to Sanatana Dharma in general, right? It's connected to Hinduism. And so anyone who goes there, this is what we've always said, if you go there and you spend a few months, you may not return. And I'm not saying you may not return in the sense that your physical body may not go home, but your mind will be completely absorbed in the self, in the Atman. And that's one of the key points, especially in Vedanta, but especially in the teachings of Ramana Maharshi, right? So And so when Venkataraman became Ramana Maharshi, and to explain his name, Ramana is a contraction of Venkataraman, and Maha being great, and Rishi being the great seer. It's not actually Maharishi, it's Maharshi, but that's a compound of those two words. So anyone who knows Vedanta or the Vedas, they came from the rishis. They were a connection with Brahman according to the Hindu scriptures, and we have Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism, if you want to call it that, as we know it today. And so Ramana is the great seer. So, and one of the great stories about that, as you and I know, is when his mother was looking for him, right? And so he had been at the mountain for a while at that time, and he actually first went to Arunachaleshwara, so the Shiva temple at the foot of Arunachala, which you and I have gone to many times, and he stayed there. And as you and I know, like, he wasn't treated very well, right? The locals threw rocks at him, and I should say young people, not older people, like young scallywags would throw rocks at him and treat him really badly. But then he slowly progressed up into the mountain, right? Like, so he lived at Virupaksha cave, and then for a long time, and then he moved up to Skanda, which have actually both become places of worship now. You and I spent a lot of time in Skanda ashram. And then his mother found him, right? And he was in silence for many years, and he wrote that significant letter, right? So she was begging him to
come back home.
Like, I don't understand all this. Like, he's just wearing a loincloth now, and she just couldn't fathom it, right? And as any mother couldn't, right? Like, because your son, or even if it was your daughter, it doesn't matter, is doing something very strange to what, and even though that she was brought up around Hinduism, I mean, actually the Iyer name is a Brahmin name, the Hindu caste Brahmin, so which is kind of interesting. Like, Ramana came from
Brahmin,
like a Brahmin lineage, yeah. Not that his family was overly wealthy and stuff. Not that Brahmins are wealthy.
Are
not wealthy. No. So he had schooling in, some Vedanta when he was younger and stuff like that. I mean, some of his uncles and that were sannyasins. And so it's not that he wasn't around and involved in that. It's not that his mother wasn't either, but I think just because it was her son, it was...
Yeah, being a mother.
Like
want to keep him around her.
Yeah. That would be a challenge for anyone, right? Like, for mother or father. His father had passed away long before this. So when she found him, he was in intense sadhana and silence, and then he wrote that letter, which kind of went like, the ordainer of souls controls the fate of everyone's prarabdha karma. So prarabdha karma here meaning predestined personal karma that we all have to live out our whole life. And then he continued and he said, whatever is destined to happen will happen. Do what you may to prevent it. And whatever is destined not happen will not happen. Do what you may to try and make it happen. So the best course of action is therefore to remain silent. So, and as everyone, and not everyone, but as we know, and as anyone who knows Ramana, is that silence was his main teaching, right? So why not remain, instead of engaging in worldly dramas and these opinions and thoughts and this, that are all on the jiva level that, they come and go too, like, we're highly influenced by the external world. It's better off to remain silent and just to, not just to see how things will play out, but also for you to understand the Atman itself. Like, often if, like what Ramana said in his teachings, if we're often engaged in the I thought, that identification with thought, then that itself is always constantly taking you away from the Atman. You're constantly moving away from that,
Yeah, definitely, especially at this day and age that we are so close to so much information. So that whatever belief we have, we identify ourselves with that, and we tend to defend that agenda, right? And we try to impose that our will over other people's will, without accepting that everyone has different beliefs and everyone has different background of growing up and everything.
100%.
So it just like nature, is a grass blade here and there. It doesn't look, never can look exactly the same. Like, that's the thing. I think that what silence teaches us is to accept the difference and diversity, and just to remain silent, so that we don't have to defend ourselves. Like, once we are defending ourselves, meaning that you have strong identity, right? Yeah, you identify yourself with something else, some sort of, I don't know, some opinion or whatever it might be, so that you have some agenda to push over other people's agenda. So then, if I was to be like that, the other person will be like that too. So where is it gonna go?
Doesn't end anyway.
Yeah, so it only conflicts. Conflict's gonna just continue, and just more noise in the world, which we don't really need, especially this day and age. So we need to again, like, embrace that teaching of silence. I know that it's not easy, but sometimes we need to just bite our tongue and swallow some bitter pills and
be a mature adult.
Well, it's that simple,
it's
actually.
That simple, yeah.
But Ramana's teaching was that powerful back in those days, meaning that back in those days, maybe probably not any different from today, actually, maybe.
Worse. World wars. World
true.
Wars.
Yeah, world
British
wars.
occupation of India.
Yeah, they were the post.
These are real life situations.
Yeah, much more like a visible. And
yeah. Than our super sensitive world that we have now, where we make up a drama out of nothing. And not that there aren't dramas, but we often over sensationalize, right? And as Jiddu Krishnamurti once said, conflict arises from wrong and wrong, right? There is no right and wrong. Conflict arises from both wrong and wrong. And so that may not be popular in this day and age because everyone has an opinion, but the thing is that, like what you said, opinions don't go anywhere, and all world conflict comes from an over-identification with something. Like, you've over-identified with something that's apparently external or to some sort of group ideology, and this only contributes to more conflict. Whereas we know in Eastern spirituality, if you're serious about Eastern spirituality and you've been listening to this podcast or watching it and been watching my videos, you should know by now that Eastern spirituality is about the complete dissolution of the I. And if you're not willing to engage in that, then it's okay. You're just not ready for Eastern spirituality. But that's what this path is about. It doesn't matter whether it's Vedanta, Buddhism, or Taoism, or any other Hindu paths as well, not just Vedanta, like even yoga and Sankhya. But if you're not ready for that, you're just not ready for Eastern spirituality, and that's okay. If you're in the comments section and you're triggered about everything and you're not ready for Eastern spirituality, if you have an opinion and you're in the comments section on anything, social media or whatever, and you're throwing your opinions around and you're triggered by something, it's that you're not ready for Eastern spirituality. It's about the complete dissolution of the I. What Ramana would say to everyone who's like that is, before you react, explore the nature of the I. And this was his second teaching, right, which was self-inquiry, which is actually goes back to the Rig Veda. If we look into self-inquiry, which is vichara, and so in vichara in Sanskrit. So self-inquiry, as you and I know from practicing for a long time, is it's intensive, and it's not for the faint-hearted. Like, it's similar to mindfulness, but also different a little bit, because you're constantly exposing who you are, you know what I mean? And your motivations, your agendas, your opinions, you're constantly exposing that.
It's like a deconstructing what this persona is made of.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a childhood and going through some problems or traumatic experience when you were a child, and I don't know, the years and when you were a teenager and the early adulthood life and all these past personal history made who we are now in the present moment.
Yes.
So everyday life we go about things without noticing what we are thinking and why we are thinking in a certain way and why we react in a certain way. But exploring that I is to deconstruct our personality and I don't know, habits, way of thinking, basically everything. Which is very like it's huge project. It's a lifetime project, isn't it? Yeah. So we need to be very patient with ourselves. I think as well. Like sometimes, if we were to practice mindfulness 24/7, let's say I know it's not easy to do it. Let's say it's possible, but the moment that you realize that you weren't mindful for last like a few seconds, for example, people tend to like mock themselves, like stupid, like stupid me. But that's just part of process. You just be kind to yourself and just remain patient with ourselves, and that's all part of Ramana's teaching. It was. And stories we hear from people or books saying that local Indian people come up to Ramana and we have this problem and that problem and family problem, financial problem. How can I solve all these problems? And he'll just sit there with just a little smile in his face and just look at him, just such compassionate, full of love kind of eyes, and just stay silent for as long as it lasts. And that person's like, I got my answer. I got my answer. Okay.
Yeah. The intense power, right, in that silence.
Yeah. And we felt that, right? Especially Skandhi Ashram. That's one of, I think, the most of the favorite place for me personally. Maybe for you too, like.
Sure.
And they open at like 8 in the morning.
8 in the morning, yeah.
But for us, sometimes that's already late because you early rise because you live in such quiet place. So when sunrise, you wake up, and then takes about like 15 to 20 minutes from the bottom
Ramana Ashram
to Skandhi Ashram. It's a nice walk, isn't it? Like early in the morning.
Oh, yeah, amazing.
And in all that area, you can still feel the presence of him and maybe the energy of the mountain as well.
Of course, 100%. That's what I'd really love to take people on a meditation retreat to Ramana and to experience that every day. Because that's what you and I would do every day. You know what I mean? Every time we're there. You get emotional.
We go there, just, remember those days that do that, sit there. You don't really necessarily have to do like meditation or anything. Just being there itself is meditation.
Yeah, for sure,
Because it's very experiential and very powerful too.
Yeah.
And sit there and say hello to local people who come every day in, day out, and also foreigners as well. And you come down for a tea, for a chai that we're drinking right now, and have a biscuit that's locally made. And
so simple.
Such special moment. Yeah.
The Wandering Swami, remember Wandering Swami? We walk up the
path. He's been there for
who knows how long. We've been going there for over 10
40,
years.
50 years, who knows. Yeah.
Anyway, well, like you said, like the thing is that we would go to Ramana Ashram, as you remember, at 5 in the morning, and we would chant Arunachala Shiva with a lot of the ladies who chant in the morning there, and then we would have some meditation in the morning, arati, in the main hall, and then around 7:30, then you start walking up the hill to go to Skandhi Ashram. Because the Swami there, I think that's just the way they've been doing it. They started somewhat late for people in Tiruvannamalai, but maybe not late for people listening to this podcast. But yeah, it's an amazing experience on the mountain there. And also at Ramana Ashram, which we should clarify that Ramana Ashram was built around Ramana as he became more popular, right? So he came down from Skanda and they built that ashram around him.
And Skandha ashram is like a cave.
Yeah, yeah.
Where Ramana spent 8 years of silence.
7 years of silence.
7 years of silence.
Mm.
And that's that cave where he stayed in silence for 7 years. So they built like a small, very small place, small ashram around that cave where everybody can go in and sit for meditation.
For sure. Yeah, so the Ramana ashram that was built around him, that's when a lot of the followers started to come, right? And it was like in the 30s when the Westerners started to come. So, and that may have been because, well, that was also because there was a lot of British, right, in India at the time. And people probably know Paul Brunton's book, The Secret, what is it called? The Secret of India? I think something along those lines, which is very highly popular because he came across Ramana and stayed there for a while, and it would have been an amazing time, especially those early 1900s where people were coming in and so back and forth. And then, as you said, like people, local Indians were coming with, and Westerns were coming with problems too, right? And Ramana, just the silence and the bliss is almost like it's darshan for the other people where there's no words to be said. They get it, you know what I mean? All of this noise going on in my head, actually, I've just got to turn that nonsense off and I've got to come back to the ground of reality, which is pure silence. And as Ramana would say, and it is an idea in Vedanta too, is the more you abide as the self, that's actually what burns all the vasanas, all the habits and tendencies out of your mind. So, not that Ramana would scoff at things like yoga or Tai Chi or anything like that, but he's of the Advaita Vedanta opinion that if you're constantly bringing yourself back to abide as the self, that undifferentiated consciousness where the sense of yourself or you don't exist, that itself is the power that burns out all the vasanas and transforms your samskaras, which obviously is going to transform your karma going forward. And from Ramana's perspective, karma and actually rebirth, in a sense, don't exist because they only exist on the plane of the jiva, which you and I know. They only exist on the plane of the jiva. They don't exist as the self is undifferent. It's Brahman. It's birthless, deathless. This is the non-origination theory of Gaudapada. We have to remember that Ramana is in the lineage of Shankara and Gaudapada. He's following Advaita Vedanta and that non-dual path. And so if reality is non-dual, then karma and reincarnation only apply to Gayang and Jason, these superficial things, personalities that we are in this world and have become, but it doesn't relate to the Atman within you and within myself and within everyone watching and listening. That is beyond birth and death. This is obviously what Gaudapada was talking about in his non-origination theory. And this is why when Ramana was dying, I've told you this story many times, a lot of the disciples were just absolutely distraught because their gurus, he's got cancer. I think Ramana was ridden with cancer, you know what I mean? But he was always still blissful. Sure, there was some pain, obviously, because the body, as Ramana said, the body is a disease, which is kind of interesting when you think about it. When they talk about disease, Ramana's saying, no, the body is a disease. And he said to them that, I don't understand why all of you are crying, because where can I go? The body's dying, but where can I go? And that's evidence from his perspective that he's established in the self. You know what I mean? Like, he's not speaking as Venkataraman Iyer, he's speaking as, the Bhagavan, you know what I mean? Like, he's speaking as that undifferentiated consciousness, because in that sense, if it's not born, never dies, was here before the universe was even born, then where can you go, So, it's easier said than done, because, the truth of the matter is that when you do have a teacher, and or a guru or something like that. It is sad when they die because,
Of course.
you know what I mean? Because for a disciple, they in a sense become almost your world because they showed you the way, they showed you the path, you know. So from a personal level, it's, you know.
Yeah, his physical form is no longer there, which is sad initially.
Yeah, sad initially, yeah, exactly. But as they said in Zen, like there was a lot of stories in Zen where students would be, or for example, a master would be crying because his master was dying, and the students are like, he's not enlightened, but they're saying he's just, he's just expressing, like, it's just a spontaneous emotion, you know. It's not like it's that they haven't worked it out, you know what I mean? I don't know how, well, I've heard stories about how Ramana reacted when his mother died, you know, but of course I think there was sadness there, but it's not, I don't think it was as, the attachment wasn't detrimental as probably the common people, because we invest so much into the external world and the relationships we have, and we depend a lot on that. And obviously the path of a jnani is to almost dissociate. You're not intentionally trying, well, I guess you could say you're intentionally trying to dissociate with the world. You're practicing vairagya, renunciation, and you're keeping yourself away from worldliness and world problems, which I guess relates also to relationships and, you know, attachments and bonds we have to.
And also you stop identifying
Yeah.
with them, like
Yeah.
what family you came from, this
Yes.
kind of identification, that you no longer identify yourself with your family anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it's amazing, like, you know, him having that steadfastness in the self, which was like mind-boggling for most people in that day and age, because there wasn't a lot of sages at that time like him, you know what I mean? There were swamis and that, and that's not a knock on swamis, but he had really, like, just gone to the other side of the spectrum, you know, like this. And Ramana actually didn't have a lot of formal spiritual training, and he didn't come from any swami order, and it was just like his own individual journey.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He did meet swamis along the way, but he began, obviously through silence, he realized, what I wanted to get back to is he realized that a lot of the people that were coming to the ashram when the foreigners and the Indians were coming, was that they couldn't get it. Some people couldn't get, like, the silence, like, you know, they feel good around him. It's a good darshan, but they couldn't, like, grasp it. So that's when vichara became popular, right? So the self-inquiry and the constant practice of that, which I want to explain to people, it can be dangerous, right, to practice self-inquiry if you don't know enough about it, and you haven't been probably trained by someone who's specifically trained in it and efficient in it. Because if you're constantly looking at the eye in certain situations when, in some sense, you need to act, then it can cause a bit of almost like a schizophrenic split in people, but if they're not, you know, schooled enough in it.
Overanalyzing.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're overanalyzing, and you're causing a split within your mind, when all you're supposed to be trying to do is applying that sense of viveka, that discrimination between what is real and what is not real. So what is real is the self, what is not real is this jiva. But are there situations where you need to apply yourself in the job, workplace, and this and that, in your relationships? Of course there is. But how, like, attached to that and how much do you believe in that is another story, you know?
Yeah, it's very fine line.
Fine line,
It's
yeah.
very difficult, but we kind of instinctually know, though, like when you act out of your own emotion or personal belief, or there's a moment that you actually need to react.
Yeah. Ramana would actually probably say that we probably never need to react. You know what I mean? Like it's regardless, because who is the one who is reacting? You know, this is the constant inquiry, right? Like, and this is where, like I said, if you're not trained by someone skillful, it can make people a bit crazy, because he's right? Who is the one who is reacting? And this is why the "who am I" question has become very, you know, synonymous with Ramana Maharshi, right? So, and that, I think that if we translated that question a little bit better in English, we'd be talking about what am I? Because who am I is applying
As a person.
but what am I is implying there's something else. Because in Vedanta and even in Buddhism and Taoism, it's more of a what as in a who.
Ooh.
You know. So Brahman is not a person or some sort of subject. It's impersonal, it's undifferentiated, and the Atman is that as well. The Jiva is the person. So I guess you could say that the first question should be, who am I? Because that is like, well, who is this I thought, these agendas, and this, why am I so opinionated about certain things? Why am I so attached to my religion, my gender, my race, so forth and so on? You're constantly inquiring into that. And then you also expose your motivations. You know, the constant exploration of that, like what one teacher said, can be an infinite regress, because you're constantly looking at the eye, and you just keep going further and further down. And from Ramana's perspective, you get to a place of complete, like, well, you abide as the self, because there's nothing, there actually is nothing there, like.
Nothing that you need to influence other people or other things.
No. It's a complete, like, well, Vedanta and Shaivism and Taoism and Zen and that are similar paths, but it is a complete non-interference, and you've kind of non-reactive, you've given up the game, so to speak. You know, they say it's a path of complete negation, but you're kind of like, it's almost an affirmation of life, because you're trusting life. See, you're not trying to influence life here and there. You have a trust and a faith, like what Ramana said in that quote to his mother, like, the ordainer of souls controls their fate, right? So why, if you understand that deeply, why do you have to go out and, like, bang the drums and try to influence people to believe this and that? That's a lack of trust in the will of Shiva, or the way of the Tao, if you will. And so Ramana is trying to get people back into that connection with you just got to allow life to be as it will. And if you're constantly a person, you won't be able to do that. But if you abide as the self's undifferentiated. It doesn't matter what's going on out here.
Well, that's the answer that we actually need to come back to when people going out there and protesting, and they, as a group, just to try to make things better, but make things better in their perspective too. Again, so people would think that, oh, then what about these problems in the world? Who's gonna fix it, and who's gonna bring it to the surface, to the world, so everybody acknowledging and this and that? But more often than not, that kind of movement causing more dramas and problems and conflicts and violence at extreme level. Whereas if we could practice individually, just like what Ramana is teaching, if we were to follow that teaching individually, that leaves a much bigger mark than, because it won't cause any conflict or dramas, because you are practicing silence in individual level, which cannot cause any harm.
No.
And that's ultimately what everybody wants.
Of course.
But we get caught into this little game of being righteous and things like that.
Me
And
versus them.
yes, that me versus them idea itself is already incorrect.
It's incorrect, yeah.
So if we were to start from that place, how can we fix the problem that we acknowledge as a problem?
Yeah, no, we can't. We can't get to the source of it.
Exactly. We just gonna make it worse, and there will be much bigger division between people. So change, if we want change, that change has to come from the individual level.
Yeah.
That's always how I come to conclusion, like there's so many problems in the world, and society is divided, but all these problems can only fixed by individuals, because individual creates the society. Society is a concept.
Yeah.
It's a concept. It's a group of people come together that creates the society. And instead of we putting importance in individual level, people giving too much of their opinions out in the society, which doesn't really exist. So, like, it doesn't really go anywhere. All we need to do is look inside. That's all we need to do. If everyone could do that, there won't be much the social problem.
No. If we all inquire within, right?
Yeah,
There's it's like the people's ignorant actions that leads to a reaction are both from an identification. And from Eastern spirituality's perspective, especially Vedanta, is that identification is the problem. Like Muji said that time, the doer of actions and the thinker of thoughts is causing all the problems in the world. And we're not observing ourselves. So I sympathize with everyone protesting, because yes, I don't agree with people's ignorant actions like that, of course, that led to the protests. But we have to examine the problem deeper, because we're not going to get to the heart of the problem if we're looking at the surface of the problem. The surface of the problem is over-identification across the board. Like you said, the society is an illusion. It's an abstract idea. Any group ideology is not real, actually. From Vedanta's perspective, all that exists is a self, is the undifferentiated consciousness. That's what connects us all as one. But we're all identifying with the jiva. We're identifying with, all of these things that we've attached to our so-called identity. And identity is the problem. And that's why people are so sensitive in the world, especially this day and age, because social media fuels that too. Like, social media fuels the over-identification, because it's so easy to be somebody, or projecting a self-image of who you think you are, And usually we are not that person we're projecting. That's why when you meet sometimes some people outside of social media, they're not what they appear online.
They're completely different.
Completely different, So what they put online is who they wish they were. Yeah. You get that a lot, right? And then you have the trolls on that who are just, they're in the basement with their Cheetos and they're doing their thing. And they're pretending to be someone in public as a good person, but they're really an ignorant person in reality. So Ramana, if he was alive now, he would just remain silent with all of the things. And that's what he would be able to teach us. And then if we could all sit there, no matter what religion, race, gender, status, and we sat there with him, what we would all realize is that within that silence, we're all one. We're all connected to Brahman. We're not different. We're looking at superficial differences that are supposed to divide us. But from Eastern spirituality, the concept of separation is an illusion, and it is a concept. Even if you look at it from a purely physical perspective, we're all part of the same planet. We're all on here doing our best. And yes, injustice does exist in society. But we're not going to fix it if we're all sitting around fighting each other without understanding each other, you know. And there are people who do stupid things and their actions are completely ignorant. But how can we evolve past this if we're constantly just continuing to fight each other? It doesn't make sense. Especially if you understand that separation is an illusion. And I'm not only talking on a physical level here. When you get down to the crux of it, we're all connected to the substratum. So you have to understand that Brahman is like a substratum. It's within everything and beneath everything, and we're all a part of that. And so this is why, like, a lot of Indians, they always write to me and they always say, like, Jason, you should teach Vedanta in schools in the West to get them to understand.
Like a just normal school?
Like a normal school, yeah. You should be teaching Vedanta. And obviously that's not going to happen because the West, being as secular as it is, will think that Vedanta is related to religion. And Vedanta is a spiritual path. You know, it's like saying Buddhism is a religion or Taoism is a religion. They're not.
Me personally, I don't really like to call it as a religion because it's much more than that.
Much more than that, yeah.
Yeah.
Even if you call Hinduism, right, you can't even really call that a religion because, like, it's more of a culture. Sanatana Dharma is a culture, right? It's a culture that's developed in India. It's the longest enduring culture known to man. So, but Vedanta specifically, being one of the esoteric paths of Hinduism, is, you know, it as people can probably tell from looking at the way that you and I talk about this, and also our love for Ramana and the mountain and everything, is that it really transforms your life and makes you a better person. And you obviously you get over all sorts of superficial BS, you know. Like, you and I never talk about, ever, you being Asian, me being Caucasian. These things don't even come up. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's 2020, people. You know what I mean? Like,
and what the local people in Arunachala remind us is that they treat us just like their family.
Yeah.
Like, in their eyes, there is no distinction.
No.
You are a two-legged creature, and you have like similar shaped body as me. The same human being, the same.
Yeah.
And they treat you just like your family.
Like when we go back to our favourite tea shop in Tirutira of Annamalai. As soon as they see us, they can see us walking a mile away when we return. Yeah. And then they have the little Indian nod and
a little like a
smirk. And, you know, like, it feels even more welcoming than when you go and see your family.
Yes.
You feel so warm, you know what I mean? Like, there's an understanding that in those places, especially in India, that everyone's connected. And they never look at things like skin color and this and that. That doesn't even cross their mind. They might ask you in India which country you belong to, which is one of the weirdest questions you'll ever get. But at the same time, yeah, it's an innocent question, right? Yeah. I belong to Australia. I don't belong to Australia. I'm born in Australia, but I don't really belong there. You know. So, but, you know, like that deep understanding where they don't see superficial things like that. They don't see, like, even if they were like Christian or something like that, right? They don't see that in those places. Like,
what I love about the people from Bharat culture, which is India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, this area, is that, like, yeah, for example, like in Tiruvannamalai, that whenever we return, we know who owns the shop, who owns the supermarket, who owns the bookshop next door and tea shop the other next door. And as soon as we walk in, there is no like a fake welcoming that we sometimes get in the West. Like, hi, hello, you're back. They just have this look in their eyes. You're back. It just, and just a little like a head wobble. And how are you? It's just very like calm and silent manner of welcoming people. And that's more touching. That's much more touching and welcoming and feels like that you are home. that I love about so much. And there's no many words needed. All you need is just acknowledging each other's presence and welcoming each other from the heart. That's done then. We're friends for life. Like, that's what I really love about the place. Yeah.
That's like, to tell a personal story, it's like that time when we just returned and you were inside Ramana Supermarket, which is just across the road from Ramana Ashram, and Divakar, the owner of Ramana Supermarket, who we're friends with, shout out to Divakar, but I was outside. I don't know why I was outside. Maybe you were, I don't know what you were doing in there, but Divakar was outside too, and we were just standing beside each other, no words said, for like maybe about a minute or so. Divakar then said, "So how long are you back for this time?" You know, and like it's the connection is, it's just so deep. You know what I mean? It's
powerful.
Not powerful. It's not like you have to chit chat like, how long are you back for, and this and that. What you doing here? You know what I mean? It's not like that that you would get over here in the West or in a first world country. It's just the subtlety has the power, right?
That subtle connection with one another.
Yes.
Doesn't matter where you're from, and doesn't matter you're a woman or man. Or
No.
Yeah, that's something very powerful.
And that power is what draws people to India and also places like Tiruvannamalai, right? That power of not only Ramana and Arunachala, but just people in general, you know?
Even like place in, let's say, Calcutta, where we spent quite some time too. If I were to go back again, well, I was there like 13 years ago already. Same people might still be there, and they'll just come up to me, you're back, and like, yeah, just that warm welcoming feeling, just all around the country, even like up north in Himachal Pradesh, where we spend a lot of time as well.
And to give people context, you spent a lot of time in Calcutta, working at the mother house, so working with sick, poor people, and you're like a local legend. I remember actually at one time we went back there. The young guy, remember the young guy? He's deaf. Yeah, he really appreciates you. Yeah.
Again, I don't know sign language that they use and whatnot, but all we needed is just to smile and deep eye contact, and that was enough.
Yeah, he's such a pure heart, that guy.
Yeah.
So, but that's what the teachings and that sort of culture, and that's what a lot of people actually could learn from India all around the world. I know a lot of people, they're so vexed and focused on political matters and politicians and this and that, but you're not looking at the people on the ground level, you know. We could look at any government, right? Like, we probably don't agree with what the Chinese government are doing in the world and so forth and so on, but we know Chinese people, we know people on the ground level who are wonderful people, you know what I mean? We're missing the point here. We're focused on politicians, on the concept of a nation, which actually, the concept of a nation is funny in India because that's a foreign concept to India, but they've kind of had to take that on, especially since Bharat got broken up into a few nations. But that's the power of India, that pull of that calmness, that humility in the chaos over there too. We have to acknowledge that it's chaotic. Very. But that's the beauty of it too, you know. And that's what actually draws people to India. And that's what actually back in the day drew people to Ramana as well. Like, they had never met a man like that. What's this guy's answer? He sits around silent. Huh? He should be out there doing something. He's saying the doer of actions and a thinker of thoughts is causing all trouble in the world. And what a powerful message at that time too, because we're talking about he lived through World War I, World War II. You know, and then there's this peaceful sage in the south of India saying that you guys are doing it all the wrong way. You're all out there telling each other what to do and how to live and how to think. And all you need to do is just to be silent with each other. to feel the heart of each other instead of telling each other, what to do. That's what's causing all the problem in the world, right? Because we're living in we have a lot more connection in the world now. And so that's why we're bumping up against cultural issues and race issues and all of these things, which probably didn't, there's always been issues, right? But they didn't exist to the magnitude that they do now because we have so much connection and we're sharing a lot of information with each other and so forth and so on. But we have no spiritual grounding, like we have no understanding or deep presence with other people, which is the big problem. And so when people came across Ramana, he showed that, especially when you hear the stories of foreigners back in the day, and Paul Brunton as well, is that it was just completely mind-blowing that there was someone like that, that didn't have an opinion. Because even if we look at, for example, if you look at Gandhi, right? Gandhi, what he did is wonderful, right? But he still, in some sense, had an agenda and so forth and so on. But at the same time, as Ramana said, he was following his prarabdha karma, and his prarabdha karma was to liberate India from the British. And so that happened. But I think and that has obviously benefited India. But what Ramana was saying about Gandhi was that he did it in a way where he was completely dedicated to, the Bhagavad Gita. Gandhi read the Bhagavad Gita every day. And completely dedicated to, spiritual cultivation and the upliftment of humanity. And so, and I know that a lot of people say, yeah, but he still had an agenda and so forth and so on. But he's a good example of how you can do things in life without being violent, without being over-opinionated. And that's why he influenced Martin Luther King, right? Gandhi's peaceful mission influenced Martin Luther King. And Martin Luther King always followed the path of peace, right? So this is almost like a Vedantic way of dealing with the world down the line, And so, and often when people look to peaceful individuals, they think of Martin Luther King and Gandhi. They don't really know who Ramana is, but they think of those sorts of people, right? And
yeah, I think those individuals had followed their own path of spirituality. That's the way they wanted to practice it.
Yep.
And again, that's why them being great leaders, so we still remember their presence. Really practiced ahimsa for Gandhi and peace for Martin Luther King. And those were the people who were extremely courageous to me.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult mission.
Well, they both lost their life.
Well, yes.
Following the path of peace, but...
And I'm pretty sure both of them, when they were alive, they were acknowledging they might get killed, right? They knew about it. But they didn't avoid it. They did that for their life.
Yeah.
They were ready to die for it, which is very rare. Yes.
Well, that's why when Ramana was asked about Gandhi, because there is a transcription of, I think it may have been an Indian, asking him, what do you think, of Gandhi's mission? And Ramana, because he didn't have a bad word to say about anyone too, and he's like, well, Gandhi's he's a jnani. He's following his prarabdha karma. He's following what he's here to do. He's not trying to be someone else. He's not doing this and that. He's just following what he's been put here to do. That's his path in life, is that, And it's not, like you said, he's following ahimsa, so he's not doing it in a violent way. So there's nothing bad you can say about it, right? Did he have the spiritual attainment of Ramana Maharshi? Of course not. Not many of us ever will, And that's why he's one of the great sages of the modern era, and why most people look to him now is because, you know, he's a giant. But most of us will never get to that stage, and I don't think that Gandhi ever had any of those illusions. Gandhi knew his path, right? He knew his path was to peacefully oppose the British occupation, and well, it worked, right? So, you know, India's independent, so there's not much you can say about that. I mean, I know there's some conjecture now with some Hindus about it and so forth and so on, but we don't want to get into that because it's a bit political and, you know, that's way off the point. But one of Ramana's points about Gandhi was, and this translates also to Martin Luther King, is the selflessness of the action. So Ramana was kind of saying that it's kind of like the nishkarma karma aspect in the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna says to Arjuna that you have to act without the sense of I am doing this, or you try not to bear the fruit of your action. You're acting as a limb of Shiva. You're just doing what is required of you in that thing, and you're not. You don't have any illusions of outcome or illusions of if it's right or wrong. You're just following the path. And in the Bhagavad Gita, as you know, it's very confrontational because it's a war between two families, you know. And Krishna is trying to get Arjuna out of that idea that, you know, that's your family, you know, like, you know, because Arjuna he's completely confused about the whole thing. He didn't want to go to war with them, and you
don't want to fight against your
you don't want,
family.
yeah. But the moral of the story is not that we should go to war with our family. It's about that we have to get out of our own way, and we have to allow the will of Shiva or the way of the Tao to guide our life in some sense. You know what I mean? Like, but you don't want to conflate that. A lot of people will conflate that, and they'll think that their opinions and their actions, from a very egotistical point of view, is the will of Shiva. But that's not. You're still acting as a jiva. You know, you have to come from a very pure place. And that's what Ramana was getting at with Gandhi, is that Gandhi was coming from a very pure place, and his actions were, in some sense, almost like the will of Shiva, you know. And likewise with Martin Luther King and other great people in society like that have opposed, you know, certain social issues, you know. So, which is getting a little bit away from what we're talking about today, but, you know, just to clarify that. But anyway, but that was the amazing thing about Ramana, because, like, you could say anything about anyone about Ramana, and he probably would be like, you know, that's just the way it is, you know, like, because for him there was no form of separation, you know. That's part of the Advaita Vedanta teachings, and they're non-dual. Who are we to say anything when you think about it, you know? And like I said before, like, if we're serious about Eastern spirituality, we have to constantly inquire into that. You know, who am I? Like, we all have intense experiences, right? Where someone will say something to you, and the fire in you is ready to yeah. But if you're trained enough, especially in self-inquiry or mindfulness, you'll sit with it. And what you naturally see is the more that you inquire into it, the more that intense energy that you have, that emotional energy, begins to subside. The problem is when we're letting it out, or we suppress it to a point where it comes out the wrong way in the future. You have to inquire into the nature of the one who is feeling the energy. Because if you're just doing it, I'm just going to be quiet, but I'm just going to keep this down there, that's never going to work. It's going to come out the wrong way in the future. And we've all had that experience, right? We've all said things that we didn't mean to people, and we've done all that before. But it's about inquiring to the nature of who is the one that feels the energy right now? Who is the one who feels that emotion? And then when you look at that, who is that? Because it's not there. It's a concept that you've developed, you know.
Yeah, when you think about like what caused my anger, like this reaction, emotional reaction, then you start to think that past experience that related to this experience and going further back and further back. So in the end, there is no like real source of that anger. That person who experienced these things in the past, and we keep identifying with that person, and we let that person to remain as today, that present moment. So that same person keeps reacting to whatever happened, the emotional reaction, anger, whatever. So in the end, that person is not really you.
Yeah.
In the end, that person is just accumulation of past experience, and that past experience caused emotional reaction in the past, and that experience still lived on to that moment, and you just let it out. You're just letting it be that way without catching it.
Yeah.
So if you go through that sort of process, and you get to the bottom line, who was reacting to it, and who is like triggered to that in that moment. So then in the end, actually, you know what? It's okay. Like, I mean, if you don't react, at the end of the day, nothing changes really. If you did react, you just might be just spent after that. You'd be just wasting your energy on basically really nothing that was that important in the end.
And who are you defending?
Well, that's it. That who
Because who's
that
there?
you're trying to defend
Who are you
is
trying to
not
defend?
really there.
Because that's the height of the ego, right? The
That's
height
right.
of the ego is self-defense.
That's right. That's another good practice to do. Again, whoever in front of you trying to impose their own will, but you're disagreeing with that. But at the same time, you don't have to really prove yourself to that, because at the end of the day, like, who are you really defending there?
Yeah.
Because that doesn't really mean anything in the end. Like, if you did express, that'll just lead to bigger conflict and bigger disagreement, and it's just gonna become sour, right?
Yeah, of course. Well, there's always a story of the Zen master and the rationalist, right? The rational, I think, was scientist, and the Zen master was explaining Satori and the non-dual reality of the world, and then he said his piece, sat there, calm, serene, and then the rationalist come and said, it's all BS, this and that, this is how it is, so forth and so on. And then he said his piece, the rationalist, and then the curator is like, so, what you got to say? To the Zen master, he's like, it's okay. It's okay.
Well said.
Well said. There's nothing else to say. He said what he had to say. I'm not going to, what do I have to defend? What do I have to argue about? There's nothing to argue about. I know this is the reality. Why would I have to defend if I know that that's the reality?
Yeah.
I mean, that guy has his opinion. That's okay. And for the rationalists, it's completely confusing, because they're like, we got to engage in a debate. We have to come to the conclusion.
You got to prove the point.
Got to prove the point. And the Zen master is completely comfortable to say, it doesn't matter if I look silly or if I look like I'm wrong. I'm completely comfortable. You're not. You're not comfortable with being right, with being wrong. You have to prove that you're right. You see?
Hectic.
And that's a hectic lesson, right? Because that's the height of maturity, spiritual maturity. You don't have to prove that you're right.
It's somewhat a bit like this. You allow them to be like that too. Like, you don't have to prove yourself, but just allowing other people to just do their thing, but you're okay with it. You don't have to interfere with anything there, really.
No. Because who's to say you're right? To interfere. I know what's best for them. That's the initial red flag. When someone says that, I know what is best for them. Red flag on the play.
How do you
How
know
do you know? Yeah.
where they...
And who is this you that you're talking about? You've put yourself above them and almost in a position of God. You don't know diddly squat what's needed. None of us really do from an individual level. We only know from that undifferentiated place. And what's best from there is there is no interference from that perspective. We wouldn't be interfering with each other. We wouldn't be having conflict because we would have a deeper understanding of ourselves, you know. And so the height of our spiritual training should be to expose our tendency to defend ourselves and to always prove ourselves. Because what you're trying to prove and defend doesn't exist. It's a construct, as you said. It's a construct. The jiva, the persona, is a construct. And, you know, argue with this as you may, but when you die, that thing has to go. It's for sale, you know. Well, in this form anyway.
Again, yes, who are you really defending? And at the end of the day, doesn't really matter.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't play any significant part in the end.
Yeah. Doesn't matter at all. And that's the teachings of Ramana, right? It doesn't matter. Like, you have to constantly inquire into... You have to inquire within. What are you made of? What is this thing that you believe in? Is it real? You know?
That's why it carries such powerful message.
Yeah.
Like in the debate, what you just said about the story with the Zen master. It's such a powerful message there.
Yeah. Well, there's such a power actually in confidence in that sort of reply, right? The Zen master's like, I'm cool. And it's like, the audacity of this guy. He doesn't even want to have a crack. You know? But that's the power of it. That's the power of humility. That's the power of everything, of like spiritual maturity, of a complete understanding of who you are. And he's not acting out of a jiva, out of a persona, because if he was to argue and debate, that's jiva, that's persona, because you have fallen into the belief of separation. You see, and separation don't exist. We think it exists because we see other people all around the world in conflict with each other. We learn from our parents and our family that are arguing all the time and so forth and so on, people, oh, this is just the way it is. These are all socially learned. It's not a reality. And when you come down to the basis, when you look at Vedanta, because we're talking about Advaita Vedanta, is that separation is an illusion, you know. When you look at Viveka, right, when you're always in the process of inquiring into between the real and the not real. So, as you know, Advaita Vedanta go to the nth degree where you are looking at what is an object, right? So Brahman is not an object of knowledge. So when we say here not an object of knowledge, we're saying like something that you can know, right? So we're looking at the world. I can see you, you're an object. I can see that light looking at me, the camera, the microphone here. These are objects. But it even gets more subtle. The mind stuff is an object. You can see it. You can perceive it. This is what it means to be Maharshi. This means to be the great seer. This is the ultimate teaching of Vedanta, is to see between that difference, that these are just objects. So your mind is an object because you can see it. You know, this is why in the Upanishads they talk about those 4 states of consciousness: the waking, dreaming, dreamless, deep sleep, and also Turiya, the 4th. From the Turiya perspective, which is the Atman level, is non-experiential. You know, I mean, it's pure awareness. It's just you are beyond the experience. So anything you can experience from Vedanta's perspective is an object. You know, so your mind, you can experience your mind, right? Your mind stuff. I'm thinking this, of blah blah blah. But you can see it. You can see it. And so that's the height of spiritual training, especially in Vedanta, also in Zen, is that it's all seen. You can see it, you know. So if you can see it, and that means it's an object. It's not part of who you truly are. Because who you truly are is the Turiya, is the one who's the perceiver, who is the seer, not the seen. So we often confuse the subject with the object. This is what we're doing, right? We often confuse those two. So we see...
Yeah, we identify ourselves with what's seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yep.
things. That's why we get confused with object as subject,
Yeah.
and subject as object.
Exactly.
The other way around. Yeah. So I think that's what Alan Watts once said. That Vedanta, especially the Advaita Vedanta practice, is just a game of hide and seek.
Yeah.
Who's there and
Yeah.
what's not.
Yeah,
and,
yeah. And constantly Brahman's playing hide and seek. You know what I mean? Like,
You thought that was me?
yeah. Because you're looking out.
Yeah.
You're looking objectively. You're looking to try and know something outside of yourself. Even in some sense, your mind is outside of who you truly are. Your body is outside of who you truly are. You know.
All of those are objects.
Yeah. That's how you get to that birthless and deathless state. You know. That's why that's why, like, there's that phrase. I mean, I just remembered it. They say that the cause of death is birth. You know what I mean? So, and that's the same with the jiva, right? The cause of the jiva is birth. You've given birth to this, but the death of that can happen any time. You know. So yeah, all of this is an object of knowledge. That's why they say in the Upanishads, those who know the Brahman do not know the Brahman, those who do not know the Brahman know Brahman. Because it's not an object of knowledge, it's not something you experience in the classical sense. We experience what we're doing now, right? But that Brahman level, that Turiya, is beyond all experience, it's non-experiential. And you come into that place as Ramana exhibited through silence and vairagya, non-reactiveness, renunciation with the world, non-worldliness. You're not confusing that reality with the reality out here. So on an individual level, Atman projected becomes the jiva, right? So because you are always Atman, but you build it, and you build this jiva in the external world, and it's not who you truly are, you know.
Yeah, so our ultimate goal in Advaita Vedanta is to reside in the state of consciousness in Turiya realm, that go beneath all this experiential realm and mind realm, worldliness realm, and go into that complete unison with the Brahman.
Yes. Yep. But you can't get that through any, like you said, you can't seek that through anything. You got to return to silence. You got to abide as the self.
Constant practice, like you continuously combing away, like layer by layer. Yeah.
Well, the thing is that when you constantly bring your awareness back to the undifferentiated consciousness, you're constantly refining your mind anyway. You're constantly refining it because you're not fueling those things that you're accustomed to fueling, like your reactiveness, your opinions, everything that divides us. You're not reacting to that because you're just bringing your awareness back to what's real. You're like, no, that's not real. I know that I feel this intense feeling to say something now, to be opinionated or to be emotional, but I'm not going to say it. I'm going to bring it back, and that energy may still be there. But the more you practice this, the less intense it becomes. That's what I would say to people listening and watching. The less intense it becomes. But if you're just beginning out there, it'll be like fire. And we've all experienced that who have thrust on this path, where someone will say something to you and it is completely ignorant and a wrong about you, but you're just like, you know what? I'm not going to say it. And this is what really begins to kill the ego. You're just starting to kill it. You're just like sticking the knife right in and you're starting to twist it. You're getting the intestines out first. You're pulling it out organ by organ. You know what I mean? You're killing it organ by organ. And that's what that practice does. But you have to be skillful about it. You know what I mean? You have to have an intuition and go at a steady pace with this. You know, don't go from 0 to 100. Slowly move into this practice because it's an intense sadhana.
Yeah, layer by layer, and just be patient with yourself.
Exactly. Know that you're going to slip up.
Yes, that's it. It's just the nature of the practice, nature of anything really. You can't get from 0 to 100. You gotta get to step by step, and actually, in going through that step by step process, you can learn so much about yourself, and also going through that slow process. Once you get to that place, you won't be movable anymore.
No.
You're firm with the place where you reside.
The Bhumi Spasha.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. The Buddhist mudra.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Yeah, it's if we can just constantly bring our awareness back there, you know, it's we're not separate and isolated from each other. That's what has to be firmly understood. And I know that a lot of people don't believe that because they are so invested in Maya, invested in the illusion. They're so invested in themselves. And sadly, this is what social media is doing to the world. It's making people believe that they are this image of themselves, that they're projecting into this artificial world. And we're all playing this game subtly, you know what I mean? On a very subtle level. And we're depending our life on vanity metrics and all of these things about opinions of other people. But when you understand there's no separation, you could give a damn what other people say about you, because there is no you. You don't exist. Fundamentally, you don't exist. And if you don't believe that, ask the billions of people who have died before us if they exist now. You know what I mean? So you either got to work the game out now or continue to live life after life until you work this game out. And Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta specifically, is the shortcut path.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a direct path, the path of jnana. It's a direct path of self-knowledge. And it's very intense for people to understand. And this is why actually a lot of people don't come across it, and why a lot of people are actually afraid of it, because they see someone like Ramana Maharshi who's just wearing a loincloth and who is completely serene. You know, people who watch my videos, especially Enlightenment Today and Sacred Word, would see the one that we have on our shrine, the picture of Ramana, which coincidentally they say in India is a enlightenment picture. Apparently you can look at that and you can get instant enlightenment. They say all that, you know. So there is that. And, you know, like if people, like you see a man like that who's in complete bliss, he doesn't have anything, nothing. Like the ashram, and that's not his, it was built around him by people who had money.
And he got much bigger after
he died, yeah. I mean, the Tiruvannamalai itself has been completely transformed. From when you see the pictures of the 30s and that, I mean, it was like nothing there.
No building, nothing. Really. I mean, there is no building now much.
But in comparison, if people listening and watching know the place, they know that it's night and day between the 30s, 40s, 50s, and modern day. So, one thing I wanted to mention before we wrap this up was the idea of that Ramana had this enlightenment, right, when he was 16. Now, a lot of conjecture around this is that the Indian belief is that he was permanently enlightened, right? So he was in a permanent state of Atman. And as most people know by watching and listening to this, we may have had experiences of that temporarily, and then we go back into jiva. We might have a job, right, where we're back into the mode of I, and we're doing what we do. And so a lot of people are skeptical that he was residing permanently as the self. But I think that the thing is that we have to think about it differently, because I think people think about things in the sense of like computer games, you know what I mean? They think of levels and they think of things like this, but it's kind of not. You got to think of it more naturally. And a good way to explain that is through Zen. So in Zen, we have the old catchphrase of before enlightenment, chopping wood, carrying water. After enlightenment, chopping wood, carrying water. Life goes on. And in Zen, they often speak, they talk about this, which actually translates to Vedanta when they talk about when people have a Satori experience, is that not that in a sense that your personality is completely evaporated, disappears, still there, because you have a mind. If you have a mind and you have interactions with people, you obviously have some sense of ego, but the power of authority has been moved from that to what is real. So the power of authority resides in this.
You gave ownership to the other one.
Yeah. And not even you gave ownership to the other.
Shifted.
Shifted. It's a difficult way in language to say, isn't it?
It's shifted.
The power had shifted to the real power, and you stopped being wound up in the illusion. So they say in Zen that, as the Buddha said, I am awake, so you have awoken to what is real. But you're still in the body, you still have a mind, and you're still functioning as a human being. But you can tell in the person that there's a different power that's driving that individual. You know, there's something that's, as you said before, immovable, the bhumi spasha, that immovable place within, which is the Atman, which, you know, or would be in Zen, the experience of Satori, the experience of Nirvana. So that's what I would like to say about that, because a lot of people say, no, Rama wouldn't have been permanently the self and this and that. But this is the way you need to think about it. It's not that he wasn't, because he was. But yes, he did have to still be a human being. You know, when his mother came back to him at the mountain and became his disciple, at the beginning, from all stories, he treated her pretty harshly, because not because that he was being a bad son, but because he had to make her understand that relationship is finished. There is no mother-son dynamic no more. You know what I mean? The power of authority has moved. I am not Venkataraman Iyer, I'm now Ramana Maharshi. Well, I'm not even that. That's a name someone gave me. You know what I mean? The power of authority has moved. And she began, obviously, to appreciate and respect that and understand that. But that's the experience for all of us that have an enlightenment experience. People will say, but I can't, if I become enlightened, I can't remain enlightened. And it's not that you remain enlightened. The power of authority has changed. Your life is completely transformed because you've moved that power and you're not acting from the jiva. The jiva's there, but the power of authority is not the jiva. You know, you're not going around as Guy Young saying, you should be doing this and you should be doing that. You're completely silent and transfixed in the Atman.
Right.
You know, doesn't mean we can't have a relationship, or we can't have a relationship with people listening and watching, or our friends and this and that. It's just that you don't have a belief in the identity that you're supposed to be, because you know that something else really exists. That's what's happened. You know, the belief in the identity has evaporated. Sure, the identity helps socially, at your job, this and that, have a laugh with a colleague, but you know that that's there and that something else is really going on.
It's kind of this place where, like, it's quite interesting place that within yourself. I'm saying that you do play this role in society or given situation, but you always remember your real place that you reside in, even in that moment when you play that role. So you can interact with people socially, of course, having a laugh and making a joke. Nothing wrong with it. But you always have this sense of presence within yourself where you always reside in. So that from that place, whatever you say, what you say and your actions always naturally been very mindful, actually. So that transaction of energy, you very subtly understand it, and therefore actually you can be even more natural in that relationship with your, I don't know, colleagues or whatever, with your friends and socially.
Sure.
So again, that concept of genuine pretender, that's the perfect way to put it. You are there and you're fulfilling the role, but you disown that role. That's not really you.
No.
It's you for that moment, but you don't identify that as yourself. Yeah. So it's very tricky, but I think once you're there, it's so peaceful and comfortable. And although many things externally might disturb you subtly, but you are naturally very aware of that, and you have this ability and power to put that aside and just let it pass, actually. Because you don't give that much power anymore. You just let it go, and you just remain that place where you reside within yourself. And from that place you will always feel comfortable. And at the same time, from that place you will fulfill your role very good too. Ironically. I don't know, because you don't own it as you, and you don't identify that as yourself. So you just fulfill your role even better. Just very paradoxical. But that's how I find it.
Because you're not invested in the one who's in the role.
Yeah, that's right.
That's why you fulfill it better.
That's right. You don't overthink about it, and you just...
Because you're not opinionated, you're not interested in conflict, because that doesn't really exist. You know what I mean? So you're not interested, you're just doing what Krishna explained to Arjuna. You just fulfill the role. You're not the role though. Fundamentally, you're Brahman. But there is a human dynamic to life. You live in a society, you fulfill that. And you do it with a smile on your face. Even in the worst circumstances, you make sure you fulfill it. And like we said, that comes back to the Zhuangzi's genuine pretending philosophy, coined by Hans Georg Moeller. So, that's the beauty of it, right? And that's actually where we all need to get to. Because even in a sense, when you think about it, the guru's still playing a role too, right? So they're playing their part. If you asked Ramana, if he was still alive, would you want these people sitting around bothering you, or would you just like to be up in the mountain on your own? You know what he's going to say. You know what I mean? So, but he's fulfilling his duty as a spiritual master to impart the knowledge with other people. And thankfully he did, because we're still benefiting from it today, even more so. More people are becoming aware of Ramana Maharshi. And, I mean, Tiruvannamalai is not quite a holiday destination, but a lot of people are really, for you and I, it's pure bliss. I mean, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world, but it's, a place where people are beginning to go, and there's a lot of Westerners actually in Tiruvannamalai now, and a lot of, obviously, Indians are becoming drawn to that area. And actually, I know Indian friends that we have that are coming from Kerala and Maharashtra and other states to actually move there. you know.
We come across some people that they just was passing by that area. They knew nothing about, these are the foreigners, they knew nothing about the place. So but they were just passing by, going to some other place through Tiruvannamalai. And they stayed for a few nights, and they just like were blown away by that atmosphere of the place and the people, the local people and ashrams and whatnot. And they were very impressed about that experience. They were planning to go back and spend some solid period of time there and whatnot. So, which is great.
Well, you remember that experience when we were staying in Puri and exploring the Sri Yukteswar ashram. And we were on the beach in Puri, just sitting at night, you know, people doing the puja on the beach. And then that couple from Israeli couple came up to us, and we got to talking. And then they said to us, because it was their first time in India, and for you and I, we've been there 15 times or whatever. But like they said, we went to some place in the south, and
the name was really long to pronounce.
And they said it completely changed our life. Like we were there, and I was giving you the elbow. I was like, I know what they're going to say here, and I said, but they actually said the Ramana ashram, and I said, Tiruvannamalai, but it completely changed, and like their whole, because they first time in India, they were traveling all around India, but their whole focus was to get back to that place, and just to be there in that energy, in that atmosphere, and because it's something else, you know what I mean? I mean, there are other places in the world like that. We could say Bodh Gaya and certain places like that, but especially from a Vedantic perspective, that's one of the go-to places, you know. Your mind becomes completely silent, you know. That's why Ramana said, he said that if anything was his guru, was the mountain, was Arunachala, because the power of the mountain completely silenced his mind. Like, and I've said on other videos, speaking about Ramana, that we've experienced that as well. You know, I mean, being there and living there for a few times, and I mean, it just completely transforms your life for the better.
Definitely. I mean, my first turning point was the experience in Calcutta that I had. Spent altogether like 9 months, mingle with locals and working as a volunteer worker and things like that. Then that time that we spent together in Tiruvannamalai was just at a different level. Definitely.
And we'll return soon. But yeah, that's the teachings of Ramana Maharshi. Actually, we could talk about it so many times, and we'll revisit Ramana. We'll revisit Ramana again and again. There's so many other things to talk about. Even the idea of if you can be enlightened permanently is a whole subject in and of itself, you know. But I think we sort of covered that briefly. And, you know, I implore everyone listening and watching, they should get to know Ramana. And I'd recommend Be As You Are by David Godman. Actually, David, he had been going to Tiruvannamalai since 1972.
And he lives there now.
He lives there now. He's lived there since, I think, 98. So, like, he's been going back and forth, and he's translated many books, many transcripts from Ramana. He has worked with the Ramana ashram a lot. He has a house there, and he's living there. I mean, Shanti.
I'm so envious of him.
But I highly recommend Be As You Are. Make sure you go out and grab that book. That book's still one of my favorite books in all of the spiritual literature, actually. It's a really good book. And yeah, we covered all that.
Yeah.
And
it was very good.
Yeah. So, guys, think about if you like what we've been talking about with Ramana and you're interested in Tiruvannamalai, leave a comment and let us know, because we're going to plan some sort of, maybe a few meditation retreats or a few tours next year, hopefully when the world returns to some sort of normality. I know things in India at the moment are not so good, so hopefully things will turn around before 2021 and we can expand this conversation. But we're always looking for feedback with that, because even though this is great to communicate with you guys like this, and Gayang and I, we love to share And I love making the other videos and writing books and all that, obviously. But there's nothing better than actually having personal experiences with people and sharing these experiences with other people. We've had tours in the past, and they've been wonderful because we've been able to share experiences and so forth and so on. So leave a comment below. Let us know what you think about that. If you would be interested in going to somewhere like Tiruvannamalai. I know I've explained this in the Buddha Purnama video where people said they were interested in the Bodh Gaya retreat, but let us know if you'd be interested in somewhere like Tiruvannamalai. And guys, I hope you're all doing well out there. We hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we'll see you guys next week.